course. Good morning, Debbie. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you? Good
I'm good.
morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, I've been told that we have a 4-week campaign kicking off today, ending June the 25th.
Yes, that's absolutely right. We're so excited to be sharing information with our beautiful community about protecting children.
All right. Now, Debbie, most people have heard of SCARS, but if individuals that are listening don't know what SCARS mandate is, can you share that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a Bermuda registered charity, and we were born October 27, 2011. Our mission in Bermuda is to reduce the risk of child sexual abuse and to be an advocate and a voice for children that have been sexually molested, as well as their affected family. And, our mandate really is to tackle this issue of sexual abuse by just empowering our adult community through education and through awareness, and also to promote healing, because that's really important as well.
With regards to prevention and information, sometimes talking about this with, I guess, community members, people in the community, can be a bit difficult. How do we get around
Yeah,
that?
it does. And, the way we get around it is learning about it.
Mm-hmm.
Is really the more that we talk about this, the better we will feel about it, because then we'll feel empowered. We don't know what we don't know. And if we don't talk about a subject, because it is very uncomfortable. It hurts to even think of a child being abused. But we can't change something that we don't talk about and we don't learn about.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just important that we talk to other adults, that we share information with our children about body safety. That is important because otherwise sexual abuse thrives in silence.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just so important that we keep this topic of communication always open so that our children can be safe and protected.
Now, for those of you that are tuned in, I'm speaking with Debbie Ray Rivers, of course, from SCARS Bermuda. If you're online, you can go to the website, scarsbermuda.com. Now, Debbie, at what age does parents or do parents start, enlightening their children or having a conversation with their kids?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, as early as 4, children can hear that their body is special.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are they special, but their body is special, and it belongs only to them. That can start as early as 4.
Mm-hmm.
At the age of 8, we need to start talking to children about the act of sex, because they, with devices now, they're going to receive information that may be incorrect or dangerous. So, or not have the tools to know what they need to do to protect themselves. But as early as 4, we can say, nobody touches you in your bathing suit area. That's a really easy, child-friendly, age-appropriate message, because it does have to be child-friendly. It does have to be age-appropriate. What you would say to a 10-year-old is going to be a very different conversation, of course, to a 4-year-old, because 4-year-olds can only understand, so much. So those conversations are important, and it's important to do at an age-appropriate level.
Mm-hmm. SCAR's mission is to prevent child sex abuse. Obviously, that's extremely important. What happens when children are not protected?
Well, it leaves an emotional scar.
Mm-hmm.
It really does, because children do not understand. There's a lot of emotions that go through a child when they've been abused. They're very confused, right? So they don't really understand what this person is doing to them. They are scared, right? They're paralyzed with fear. Children were not meant to come to this world to be sexually abused, to be used as sexual objects, because sex is really about intimacy. And children know nothing about intimacy. We don't learn about that till we get older and know what that really means. It's not just an act.
Mm-hmm.
So when a child has their innocence stolen, it can be very confusing. It can be very scary. There's also some guilt around it, because a lot of perpetrators, they blame them and say, well, you wanted it, you'd like it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of guilt with that. There's a lot of shame with that. Sexual abuse, there's just something that is just so shameful about it. Sometimes sex feels good, so it's very confusing for a child because their body is responding, and they don't understand that, right? There can be sadness. What if I tell, nobody believes me? What if I get in trouble? Sometimes there's threats from the person who's harming them. But it can also cause a child to be very angry. In the beginning, when they're little, they don't understand what's happening to them. And then as you get older, you start figuring it out. and you realize this should not have happened to me. This person was a person, 90% of people who abuse children are people we know, love, or trust.
Mm-hmm.
So then the child grows up and says, wait a minute, this person should have been protecting me. They figure it out and not harming me. And that can cause a lot of anger because, it can cause trust issues. I trusted you to take care of me. You were in a trusted position. You shouldn't have been taking advantage of me sexually. So it causes a lot of emotion, which, I always say sexual abuse has a name, and it's called pain. Mm-hmm. And it does cause an emotional scar. And, it affects everybody differently. But we know through doing this work for the last 8 years that many adults in our community have endured this.
Right.
And we've heard the stories. We've heard their pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that this does cause emotional scars and trauma.
Obviously, we're a small community. So when things like this happen in a family, many times or sometimes individuals obviously turn a blind eye. Why is that?
Yeah, well, it's because it's very difficult to deal with something that you have to act on.
Mm-hmm.
Sexual abuse is against the law.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a crime.
Yes.
And sometimes we don't want to have to deal with that because it means people are going to get hurt. Now, the child's already been hurt, but now we've got to make decisions that are going to cause the perpetrator pain or shame to a family, And let me just tell you, when sex offenders, abuse children and they're in your family, it has nothing to do with the other family members. We are not in control of other people's choices.
Mm-hmm.
But yet that shame comes on, in family. And I know because I've had to deal with this in my own family. But it wasn't the people in that family that did it and caused it. But it does cause automatic shame to that family. I just want to let other family members know this is not your fault. You didn't make this choice unless you know about it and you've seen it and you've witnessed it and then you cover it up. That's not good either. And that can happen because people are afraid. They don't know how to react responsibly. But, many times child victims and families don't want the matter to become public because we are a small community. And that's been the challenge with this issue for generations, and that's what silenced it. They may not have confidence in the judicial system, or they may have been threatened if they report it. So there's a lot of reasons. A family may lose financial support if the perpetrator has to go to be held accountable for this. So there's a lot of reasons why many cases go unreported. But I think for years, we weren't talking about it. We didn't understand it, and there was no prevention.
Right.
We were dealing with the aftermath of abuse, but we really weren't putting, providing our community with education. And that's nobody's fault. It's just that, now we have this educational tool and we have awareness, and it's not about pointing fingers or blaming. It's about we have to protect kids, and sexual abuse is preventable.
Mm-hmm. So basically, family members, parents need to start having the conversation relatively early, because at least if you start having the conversation, our children will understand.
Yes, and our children will know what to do to tell a safe adult if something's happening to them. Mm-hmm. We also have to react responsibly and let a child know that, I'm going to be okay. If anybody ever hurts you, you can come and tell me anything about anyone, because my job as a parent or a guardian is to protect you and to love you. Mm-hmm. And that's my job, and I'm going to be okay. I always say, especially to our wonderful daddies out there, and mommies who say, I'll kill anybody who hurts my child. If the child hears an adult say that, they're probably not going to tell because they don't want to lose that adult in their life. And so we have to be very careful with our words. Your body is special. You are special. Nobody should ever touch you in your private parts or your mouth. That is private. And if they do, you can tell me anything about anyone, because my job is to love you and protect you. A lot of times children want to protect their parents.
Yes.
They love their parents. That's another reason they don't tell, because they don't want to hurt the family. They don't want to break up a family, so they may not tell. We have to let children know that would be okay. It's my job to love and protect you.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure even with regards to parents, trying to understand this can be hard at times.
Yes, especially if you're a survivor yourself, or you've had some other trauma in your life and you haven't had the opportunity to be healed from that. we've all had, and I can't say any family has been free from trauma. I don't know if we can honestly say that, because, things happen in people's lives. But it's so important as adults that we get healed.
Yes.
Because it's very difficult to, help our children when we're hurting ourselves, and children will look to us as examples. And so, years ago, Christy, we didn't get help when we were hurting. It was shameful to reach out for help.
And some
But
people
now,
still feel like that today.
Yes, and it's important that we do that. We all need help in our journey of trauma, and we have amazing resources out there. SCARS is not a resource for healing, but we have amazing resources out there for healing. I know there's a show coming on, I believe it's June 8th on your broadcast on television about trauma, and led by the Family Center. And that just makes our heart so happy to know that we're going to start talking about this. It's okay to say I'm not doing well. Not to let our children, I don't think that's very healthy sometimes for our children to see that, because that might shut them down. But, and it's hard to fake that, but it is important for adults to get healed.
Yes.
So that we can help our children with whatever they're dealing with as well.
And if parents are listening and they have, had this happen in their family, how does a family heal together? Because you also have to heal yourself, but how do they heal as a complete unit?
Well, I always say revealing is healing. And the best thing is, to be able to shed some of that darkness that's happened in the light, not to cover it up and act like it never happened, and to say, how can we get better, and to reach out to some resources. We have amazing help, resources for healing in our community, and we have a lot of great nonprofits out there offering that resource, and through the EAP. I mean, there's just some great resources, and not to be ashamed that you need help, not to reach out and get support. And we need to support each other when it comes to our trauma, and help each other to understand, we're human, we mess up, but the most important thing is really working hard on changing the behavior. It's like sex offenders. It's not about just saying sorry. It's about changing the behavior, admitting we have a problem, admitting some of our, whatever the weakness is. But the one thing about sexually abused children, it's a crime. It is against the law, and we have to hold those accountable who harm our children.
Yes. And I think this will always be, I don't want to say a taboo conversation, but it's always going to be a conversation where individuals, it's like they feel that pain, that having the conversation, even if one doesn't know a family member or anyone that has experienced this, just talking about it, envisioning someone abusing a child, I don't think it sits well with many people.
No, but I think that that's why, SCARS is in the community offering education and awareness. Once you empower yourself and start that conversation early, the key is starting the conversation early with children and often. And I'll tell you, books do a great job. We have wonderful psychologists and authors in the world that have written great books about starting that conversation. So the parents can use a storybook to describe about body safety.
Yes.
On our SCARS website, we have a tab for resources, and we have a SCARS lending library. And we encourage people to go to that library. You can, either borrow the book from SCARS or order one for your own library, and, share that information with your child. The earlier, the better. We were so uncomfortable talking about sex. We couldn't even call a penis years ago. We had to give it another word because of shame. And so we've got to get past that and to know it's okay to start talking about, our private body parts, and that our bodies are special, and really giving the right names, talking to other adults when they cross boundaries of children. Sexual abuse always begins with crossing a boundary. And we as adults, we just have to be aware and watch out for those things.
Yes.
And intervene when an adult is crossing the boundary of a child. Intervene. Use our voice and say, that is not right.
I remember seeing an interview years ago when Oprah Winfrey had her show, and
Mm.
had she was interviewing individuals that have been incarcerated for sex abuse against
Yeah.
children, and some of the conversations that, or some of the information that this one gentleman stated. He was an older guy, so he had, most people in the community probably called him like grandpa or papa, and he, at that time, he said, parents need to be very mindful of who they allow their children to go around. You don't just allow your
Yeah.
children to be around anyone. And this interview has to be at least, I would say, about 10, 12 years ago. And thinking
Oh,
about it
yes.
now in 2020, it still rings true.
It sure does. I mean, I watched many of those shows because when Oprah was on television, she was in my kitchen every night at 8 o'clock.
Yes.
And this was all around 2004
Mm-hmm.
when our family endured this. And
Mm-hmm.
so I learned a lot from her shows. And you are absolutely right. I saw those interviews, and those that abuse children will say it themselves. The parents weren't paying attention, or it gave them an opportunity. They targeted, vulnerable children.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why we need to do our due diligence as parents, and there are things that we can do. Getting educated is very, very important on what the signs are and what the facts are and how to minimize that opportunity. Youth serving organizations can do their due diligence and what they need to do when they open their doors to children. So, it is an adult's responsibility to protect children. There are things we can do, and sexual abuse is preventable.
Mm-hmm.
So you're absolutely right. I remember those shows.
I will
yes,
never
okay,
forget.
to say
I don't think I would ever forget that one interview with the older gentleman. I think they called him Papa, Grandpa/Papa, and some of
mm-hmm.
the information he was given made you think, because he said, he wasn't. He did earn up to what he did, and he wasn't justifying
Yeah,
his actions. He basically was saying,
right.
some parents allow their children to just be around anyone, sit on anyone's lap,
Yes.
sleep over at people's homes, and you don't even know the dynamics of their family.
No, exactly. No, I don't remember that. I mean, I remember Oprah interviewing many sex offenders. You're absolutely
Mm-hmm.
right. And, I do remember hearing that. And it makes sense. It makes total sense because we have to know who is around our children.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to give our children a voice.
Yes.
Because even if they're around someone who makes them feel uncomfortable, they need to know that they can share that with us. And we're not going to judge them, and we're not going to not believe them, and we're not going to blame them.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to listen, and we're going to listen to that red flag that says, okay, I need to pay attention to this, because nobody should make any child feel uncomfortable ever.
So that
Children
means
are innocent.
definitely, and that means that children have to feel comfortable talking to their parents. They should have the relationship,
Yeah.
even at 4 or 5,
Yeah.
that I can tell mom or dad, auntie or uncle anything.
When somebody makes me feel uncomfortable, I can tell them, and they will do something about it. They will listen to me, and sometimes they might not even say anything. It may be their actions. They may not want to go home with somebody, or they may not. Now, it may not be because of sexual abuse, but we need to start really listening to our children and figuring out, because children are very wise.
Yes.
And they're very intuitive, and they can really let us know when something isn't right. But we have to be in tune with that, and we have to know what some of those signs are, and really look out for those signs. But listen to our children, really listen to them. That's really important when it comes to protecting them.
Absolutely. I don't know if this has ever been asked, but I don't know how I asked this, so I'm just going to ask it. Does a child molester have any specific characteristics?
Well, many times abusers are someone who are bullies. They exert many times they can be a bully. They exert power, because that's what abuse is. It's exerting power over another person. Sometimes, and I will say this, research shows that many abusers were abused themselves as children. Now, it may have been sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, I don't know. But it doesn't mean that everybody who is abused is an abuser. That I will say. But many times abusers have been harmed themselves and never received the help that they needed.
Yes.
and they may be angry. I mean, I've read an interview of one of the most prolific sex offenders in the U.S. You know, he was abandoned as a child. His mother worked all these jobs. He was out causing havoc in the community. The state took him away, put him in a state home where he was repeatedly raped by men. Well, what do we think is going to happen to that man's life? Hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
And nobody protected him. And it's not justifiable. That's not a justification.
No.
But if we don't heal hurt people, then they may hurt other people.
That is true.
And so, you know, also a sex offender will push for isolated one-on-one time with children. You know, always being the person to volunteer, prefer to be around children than other adults. You know, those are some of the things that we have to look out for. You know, always pushing, I'll babysit, I'll do this, I'll do that. You know, and that could be a cause for concern. Now, there are people that just love children, and I get that. But child molesters groom victims. They groom families. They're quite manipulative. They seduce their victims. They may, you know, they may buy the child a new cell phone or always new toys, you know, to try to get the child to, you know, trust them. But, you know, many times it's controlling. They may target a child who's vulnerable. Maybe the parents are going through a divorce. Maybe the child's feeling lonely or neglected. You know, they look for that vulnerable child. They also look for that child that won't tell. Because guess what? A sex offender doesn't want to get caught.
Correct.
Why are they going to risk telling a child? And the other thing is, a child molester must know it's wrong. Otherwise, they wouldn't hide it. They would do it in front of other people. So there is an element that they know it's wrong because it's hidden. It's in secret. They tell the child it's our secret. Don't tell anyone. But I think a lot of it is about how it makes them feel, which is powerful. And you know, that's a little bit about some characteristics. But a child molester can be anyone. You know, child sex abuse doesn't discriminate whether you're a perpetrator. It doesn't matter what you look like, who you are, what you are in the community. You know, it can be anyone. And so it's very, you know, there are female perpetrators, there are male perpetrators. You know, it could be someone in a family, someone in a trusted position. But the most important thing is to really educate our children and educate them and give them the voice. They need the voice to be able to come and tell us anything about anyone. And that, you know, nobody should force affection on them. You know, children should have the right to say, no, I don't want a hug. Children need hugs. That's so important. But it needs to be their choice. We need to give children choice. And we also have to teach children how to respect other children's bodies. Nobody touches them, and they don't touch others in their private parts. You know, that's really important, too. And also helping children understand what their uh-oh feeling is. You know, when children get a little butterfly in their tummy, that means something. And to really pay attention to that.
And you know, with the conversation and being open and talking to children and the children, your children being comfortable with you, that's so important, because I've heard of times that, you know, children have said to their parents or a family member, I don't like that person. And when you hear a 4-year-old say that, you know, I would think that most people would listen.
Yes. But sometimes we as adults are busy, you know, or we'll work, you know, and I'm not making excuses, but sometimes we have to unbusy ourselves and just listen. But, you know, that's why I think conversation is so important, and talking about this is really important, and awareness is really important, because it may just spark something in someone, you know, because we are busy or we're stressed, we're anxious, you know, and we're not paying attention to some of the things that, you know, because we have other things really taking, you know, precedent in our lives. If we're under stress or we're working 3 jobs, you know, it's difficult. It's very difficult for people out there. But I think once you have the information, you know what to look out for. And the most important thing is really building our children's confidence.
Yes.
To let them know that no is no, and they can say no. Because most times if a child says no to an offender, guess what's going to happen? They're going to go target another child because they don't want to risk that child telling, because they don't want to get caught. Right?
Debbie,
so it makes sense that we...
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying it makes sense that we provide children with a voice and to help them find their voice and let them know that they can say no. You know, to someone who's making them feel uncomfortable.
And this is where the whole conversation or just engaging with our children come into effect. And I say that because I can always tell when a parent engages with his or her child just by how they speak. When you have if you put three-year olds together, and you have one that uses the words that knows how to say please and thank you, and speak in complete sentences, I'm like, wow, that parent, probably engages with their child, reads to their child, teaches them how to, use the words. And then you have other children that might be a little bit slower in that department.
Yes, and that could be, biological, or it could be something else going on. But the most important key is, you're right. We do need to communicate with our children a lot and talk to them, read with them. That is really important, and that is the third step in our training, which is talk about it. Talk to children about body safety. Let them know about their body. Let them know that they have choices in life. Nobody has to force them to do something they don't want to do, and to speak to them with love. To let them feel valued and loved from the people that bring them into the world. They have to feel that love. That's very, very important, and they have to know that they will be protected no matter what. But it's very difficult to give love when you haven't received love, and that's where we go through, healing our own pain as adults from childhood, so that we can pass on that, and our children pass that example on to our children. That's why that's so very key to get some help on what we never had. And now that's not for everybody. Some people, are able to cope easier than others, but it really is about our coping skills and having us recognize, some of the things that happened in our childhood, maybe the reasons that we're doing things. And then, just working on having the right tools to help us to get better, and to change some of our behaviors that may not be healthy.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Well, with this 4-week campaign, for everyone that's tuned in, today is June the 4th. Then Ms. Debbie will be back June the 11th, 18th, and 25th. SCAR's website is scarsbermuda.com. And during this campaign, Debbie, we will be educating and talking to our listeners about understanding, what individuals can teach their children or start with body safety.
Yes, and next week, June 11th, we're going to be talking with Kelly Hunt from the Coalition for the Protection of Children. Is going to be in the studio with you, and I'll be on the phone, and we're going to be talking about body safety with children and adults, and why that's important to have that conversation with our children. And then on June 18th, we're with you again, and we're going to talk about, we're going to have Sloan from CyberTips in the studio, and we're going to talk about online safety for children. And then the last week, we're going to talk about how we can prevent sexual abuse in our youth serving organization.
All right. Well, it looks like we will be informed with a lot of information, and sometimes having these conversations is always necessary. But like you said, individuals, we get busy, we become preoccupied, and any type of conversation like this that's going to benefit not only adults or children is always beneficial.
It is. It really is, because children become adults, and that becomes that's our community. That's our society.
Yes.
And so it's important that we get it right when they're little.
Absolutely. Well, it's always a pleasure, Ms. Debbie. I look forward to speaking with you next week. And like you said, Kelly Hunt will be joining me in studio. That's going to be a first. She will be the first person in studio since March. So that's good.
Wow. Well, we're excited about that. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ms. Debbie, and I look forward to speaking with you next week.
Yes, so do I. Have a great day.
You too. Have a great one.